Before we start, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Do not forget to smash the heck out of the like button, but most importantly, what are your thoughts? Drop a comment. This is going to sound like a cop-out, but I have no doubt that the future of the war in Ukraine is hinged on 2023. This really could be the year that makes or breaks the war, with 3 massive internal Russian scenarios that need to be settled. How this happens could alter the outcome of the war and potentially throw Russia into turmoil. Now obviously there are other items to consider like the economy, but those are not things that truly concerns a dictator, rather it's his base of power and how his people perceive him. Firstly, will Putin run for re-election in 2024? Russia's constitution was amended in 2020 to allow him to remain president until 2036, but even though democracy is questionable in the country, they still like to have the idea of it, so elections will take place, but will he need to decide whether he runs or not? Putin has not made any remarks about his intentions, but by not showing his hand, he manages to keep the elites who prop him up in the dark. Indeed, in the summer of 2020, he justified the constitutional changes that made it possible to extend his rule as a guard against unrest among the elites, who he said, need to work, not look around for successors. But how have his intentions and the elites' feeling towards him been changed by the war and the fact that it has not gone according to plan? I believe that the war has strengthened Putin's resolve to stay in power beyond 2024, especially since it has largely been a failure that has significantly tarnished his reputation. He will want this corrected in order to assure his eternal legacy. Others feel that Putin may be prepared to give up power as part of a solution to end the conflict with Ukraine. But that is pie-in-the-sky stuff for Europe's bully boy, but a part of the elite clearly hopes that such a reset will suffice to end Russia's recent string of setbacks. Then there is also his much whispered health and whether that will play any role in his decision. The 2024 election has become a major source of anxiety for the elites. It will do more than any other issue to influence the events of 2023, as the political class tries to work out Putin's intentions and plan around them with an eye to minimizing their own risk. This also brings questions: if not him, then who? Is there a chance for a more centrist figure, or would we simply end up with Putin 2.0? Secondly, there is the growing divide between those in the elites who favor escalating the war, and those who don't. This causing unrest in the Kremlin, bordering on a secret civil war. The pragmatists, who consist of technocrats as well as mid-ranking officials in the military and the security services, are united in their conviction that the war should be paused and rethought, and that the country should opt for a more realistic policy in keeping with its rather limited capacities. The hawks call for Russia to not only unleash its full military might against Ukraine, but also to radically restructure its own political and economic system. They include people like Wagner's, Prigozhin and Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen warlord, amongst many others. The struggle between the hawks and pragmatists promises to be 2023's key political fights, and one that hinges largely on events on the battlefield. You see, the worse Russia performs militarily, the more vicious the pragmatists battle with the hawks. If the regime's loyalists start to show dissent, the Kremlin may find it difficult to repress it. The hawks will take the offensive, targeting the military brass and politicians, as Prigozhin already has. The pragmatists, meanwhile, will express doom and gloom about the direction of the conflict, seeking to scale back Moscow's war goals and force recognition that victory is impossible. The non-military elites will be drawn to this message, especially as they were taken by surprise by the invasion and have always feared its consequences. All this leaves Putin and therefore Russia stuck between going all in militarily and the potential for a possible de-escalation. Either way, expect the animosity between the two groups to continue with additional mysterious deaths and open dissent. The third and final issue Russia faces is the situation with government personnel changes, which are highly likely, even if it is hard to predict who will replace whom. One reason a reshuffle is that the current members of the power structures are mostly old and exhausted by the war and military failings, forcing Putin to look for new ideas and a dynamic edge that is badly lacking. Another is the coming presidential contest. Historical precedent has shown that before each election, Putin has had a shake-up to appease the population. Then of course there is the infighting within the government. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov are being blamed for corruption within the armed forces, while the FSB has been slammed for intelligence failures. Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev is seen as having lost all connection to reality, and Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin as too politically neutral, while Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiullina is suspected of secretly opposing the war, which of course is a big no-no in the eyes of Putin. All three of these points will ultimately be profoundly influenced by the military events in Ukraine. So, what is happening on the battlefield? After months of battlefield successes, as they slowly clawed back territory from the invaders, Ukrainian momentum has stopped. The Russians, for the first time since the start of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, have regained the upper hand. The most striking success came with the taking of Soledar. After months of successfully defending Bakhmut to the south, Wagner forces moved north and in short order accounted for Soledar, thereby threatening the northern flank of Bakhmut. But after such stoic defense, why did Soledar fall so quickly? Well, the one theory given was that reinforcements were thrown so quickly into the defense of the town that the overall command structure and cohesion was lost completely. Effectively, there were too many cooks, and the broth was spoiled. The Russians followed this up with advances to the south of Bakhmut, almost completely encircling the town and the very real threat of cutting off the town's last supply route. The Ukrainians have reached a point whereby they have to either withdraw or risk being cut off completely. With this situation starting to become a crisis for the Ukrainians, they are also facing a series of strong attacks further south in Volodar, where the Russians are throwing a huge number of men at a veritable Ukrainian wall. So far, their attacks there have been hugely unsuccessful with a massive loss in life and equipment, but this appears to be the way they work, and the attacks will continue until the Ukrainians are ground down. Now, none of the advances thus far can be deemed as strategically important, however they are still advances and a forward movement. Something that Putin can latch onto in a desperate scrap to hold things together. Prigozhin will undoubtedly use the credit gained in the successes around Bakhmut to further his own political goals, something that could undermine Putin in the long term. Has the minimal success enjoyed recently been good enough to appease the hawkish elite? With the Western tanks and APCs arriving shortly, Ukraine is arguably going to be in a better position to continue their counter-offensive, and Putin knows it. His most recent bullish comments were directly aimed at the Hawks. He delivered a speech at the 80th anniversary of the Russian victory at Stalingrad. His comments were clear threats to widen the war and a veiled threat to use nuclear weapons. It's this type of talk that thrills the hawk elites and further strengthens their dedication to Putin, something that he hopes to grow towards 2024. Russian political life will remain in the grip of the war's grim and oppressive atmosphere, leaving elites even more anxious and fearful of the future. Repression will undoubtedly grow, with all dissent criminalized, elements of a state ideology introduced, and new pretexts found for even longer prison sentences. In conclusion, 2023 will be the year that defines Putin and how Russia continues its war. Either way, it's going to be a bloody, messy affair, and Ukraine needs to grab an opportunity from the poor state of internal Russian politics to improve their situation. This really is the make or break year for Russia and arguably the world.